Today I am so excited to be talking to author Heather Webb. And Heather, I forgot to ask you if you have the physical copy because I don't. But her latest book that is coming, oh yay, there it is, because I love that cover. It's so amazing. There it is, The Last Christmas in Paris. Among other books, she's got Fall of Poppies, Rodin, did you say Rodins? Rodin?
It's Rodin, actually.
Rodin's Lover and Becoming Josephine. So we're going to talk about all of her books, but this one is so exciting because next week it comes out, and I'm sure that you have been so busy, and I see all the great reviews on it. I mean, I'm sure you're very excited about this.
I am. This book feels special to me somehow. And all of I think of my books as my children.
Yes.
All of my children are special in their own way, but there's something about this one. Hazel and I have been saying all along as we were working on it, this book, what is it? I don't know. There's this magical chemistry between the characters, I think, that we didn't necessarily plan on. I mean, of course we wanted them to be great, but
right.
But they came alive so well on the page, and that when you're writing an epistolary novel, that's key. You know, you want these voices to be really realistic and intimate, and I feel like it worked out that way. So I just love it so much, and I'm doing this again near my heart, one of my babies.
Right.
So I'm very excited that others seem to be loving it too. So it's definitely,
I saw all the great reviews. And, you know, I just talked to Hazel recently about her book, The Conningly Secret, because I still didn't have, oh my God, she is amazing. I mean, she is, you know, and when I saw you two were getting together, that's how I found you, because she was saying, you know, such great things about you. I'm like, well, I want to talk to her. I want to know Heather. So how did you two hook up? I saw for Fall of Poppies. Now, for that book, let's start over for everybody that knows. Fall of Poppies is a bunch of short stories about World War I. Okay.
Yep.
And she was in that book, and you were in that book, and then you edited the book along with 5 other women, I think. And so that's pretty awesome. I'm really loving the short story thing and the collaborations. I mean, that was your story was so good. Her story was I was reading story after story. I'm like, these are so good. You got such great authors.
Thank you.
Did you initiate that? Was that your idea?
I did. You know, I really love sort of 1850 up through the end of World War One. That's kind of my favorite time in history.
Yes.
There are a lot of eras that are interesting to me, but that in particular. And so when Downton Abbey was going off the air, I just thought, no. And I'd been loving all of these World War I books that had started to come out during that time frame, and really wanted to take part in that push, so to speak. So I just started thinking, you know, what would make sense in terms of a theme to that holds all the short stories together. So we picked Armistice Day. Well, I picked Armistice Day, and the very first, you know, the original Veterans Day, and it was such an artificial thing. The first Armistice Day. I mean, they chose at November 11th at 11 o'clock that the fighting would stop, and that was kind of fascinating to me too. So I just started talking to some of the authors I know that like to write in that era, and everybody was very excited to do it. Short stories pose their own sort of challenge. I mean, you've got to get a lot in a short space. And so we all kind of wanted to try that too. Most of us hadn't done one before. So there were 9 of us total. And so everybody gave me a pitch, and I looked through the pitches to make sure all the stories were different. And, you know, we didn't have 5 nurses kind of thing. And it lucked out right from the beginning, which was really cool. And then my agent actually took the project and pitched it to editors, and it sold very quickly, which was very cool for us. So, and for the launch, we most of us, 7 out of 9 of us, got together. Hazel flew over from Ireland, and we went to a couple of different places, and you know, we had wine and laughed, and everybody wore a poppy to commemorate, you know, those who died in World War I. So yeah, it was great fun. So from there, Hazel and I had so much fun hanging out together, and we really hit it off. So, and we have the same agent, which is great too. So we just started talking about doing something else World War I, and then it kind of rolled from there, for Last Christmas in Paris. So
yeah, and that's different than doing a short story in the same book that you're writing different stories. But to go together on, I'm so fascinated by authors who decide to collaborate, because especially a novel like this, like, how did you figure? I mean, of course, now we have the advantage of the internet. You're not like mailing revisions back and forth, but you still like have to have the same vision for how the book is going to go. And is it like somebody writes this and then somebody writes that, or do you work on each part together?
Yeah, we didn't know what we were doing either. So we just sat down and we started plotting. So we had this flurry of emails and Facebook chat windows. I would think of something and she would right away think of something to piggyback off of that, and then back and forth, for an hour. And next thing you know, we're like, oh my God, write this down. So we pasted it all and put it into this outline. And then we wrote up a synopsis, and we decided at that point which characters we were going to write. And so we started off each writing certain characters, and then after that we decided to, for the first editing draft, we would only edit the voices that we worked on initially, that we wrote initially, to preserve the real, to preserve their voices so they didn't blend too much. But then after that, we both touched every single page. So it was really just the first draft and that first round of edits where we, worked almost sort of independently and parallel of each other. And then from there, we both worked on everything, shaping the characters and so on. So.
Well, what do you, since you've already written books and she's written her own book, how do you compare it? I mean, is it more fun to be able to talk to somebody about how the book is going to go? I would think that'd be a lot of fun, actually.
It really was. I had been working on something on my own that was a very angsty project for me. It was challenging, and I was growing a lot in a lot of ways in terms of my writing, and I knew it was going to be a risk taking it to market. And so I had a lot of angst. And so this project came along, and like I was saying before, I loved working on it so much. It was kind of this very fun, exciting thing to work on that didn't feel like real writing, because it wasn't my book, it was our book. And yes, absolutely, the collaboration has made it a completely different experience. I mean, every time we have something go well, it feels bigger. The victory that we kind of get to celebrate feels bigger. Like the foreign sales, we've already had a lot of foreign sales, and we just screamed over that and did a virtual toast, and the book's going to be in Target, which is exciting and not an easy thing for writers to get. Yeah. So, another great, exciting thing for us. And it really feels bigger doing it with somebody else. So yeah, a lot more fun.
Yeah, why don't you give us a little synopsis of it, of the book? You can
of the book.
Give me like the pitch.
So it's as we said, World War I, but we have a female journalist in London who's sort of grappling with her place in the war and the propaganda. She wants to do more than sort of be at home, and doesn't know how to break free of the societal expectations surrounding her position. She's in a wealthy home. Her mother doesn't want, her to be doing anything outside of her knitting circle, right? The knitting for the troops. And then we have her childhood friend and brother who go off to the front. And her brother is terrible at writing. He'll send her a letter here and there, but Thomas, Lieutenant Thomas Harding, is great about writing. He's a Shakespeare scholar at Oxford before he goes to war. And so they write back and forth, and they're friends, and a lot of things happen. Of course, you have war, so there's going to be loss. But that's basically, yeah. So it's friendship, loss, and love that occurs over time. So
and then it also goes to not the present, but it goes into a different in the 60s, right? It also then has a
Yes.
section that's in
Yes. So we frame the whole story, all of the letters and telegrams, with 5 very short parts. You know, they're about 2-3 pages each of Old Man Thomas, we called him. 1968, looking back, and in that framework, there's a final sealed letter that he has yet to open, and there's this sort of mystery that unravels as you're reading the letters for the past. So yeah.
That's awesome. I can only imagine because, like I said, your short story and Fall of Poppies, like you had me going, and then the end, I was like, oh my goodness, like I love your writing style. Like I didn't see that coming at all. Okay, so I can only imagine, and same with Hazel. So it's like I can only imagine how amazing that ending is going to be. So, but it's getting so much, Actually, people are accusing me lately of I know all you guys on Facebook, all you historical fiction, right? And I've kind of gone through a month of like doing nothing but historical fiction novels and talking to you guys. And then I asked somebody else and they're like, oh, I thought you only did historical fiction. I was like, no, I just love all my women on this historical fiction page because the stories are so amazing and I love historical fiction. I don't know. I just do. I mean, I think it's a way to learn about history and I've learned more about history in this last month of all kinds. I've been everywhere in history and learned more than I ever learned in school,
I think that's why I love writing it and reading it, honestly, is because you get to learn in a painless way, for one thing.
Right.
But also there's this sort of romantic escapism that happens. You step back into the past, and for some reason to us in our minds, the past is romantic on some level. And even though we're talking about these hardships, the war, but there's something about that sort of captures our imagination, and we want to sort of somehow be closer to it to understand, how things were back then. And the thing is that laid the groundwork for today. Right. So when you're learning about all that stuff, it's you make all these connections about who we are today, and it's kind of fascinating. So yeah, historical fiction is by far my favorite. I didn't think I was going to write historicals because I was a high school teacher.
Right.
And so I had this 15-year-old voice in my head perpetually. And I love high school kids, and I like young adult novels, and I thought that would be a natural extension of my voice. But when I sat down to write, that's not what came out. And it was kind of amazing to me to realize how much I'd always loved history and geography and foreign I mean, I taught high school French and foreign language and the culture that went with all of that. So it kind of makes sense now over time. But and maybe I'll write a young adult novel. Who knows? One of these days.
I'm sure you have one. But, I'm a homeschooling mom, and that's kind of how I found historical fiction.
Okay.
I homeschooled my 6 children. I use different books, because when you go straight from a history book, their eyes just kind of, dates and things.
Yeah.
But if I could find a book about when, the era that we were learning about, and it was a good book, they would soak it right up. I mean,
yeah.
And what I'm happy about these books from you is that I've read a lot of World War II. I went like a big stretch of World War II, and you're writing about World War I, and right away I'm thinking, I don't know that much about World War I. Not a lot of people write about World War I as World War II because it's kind of World War II is still right there. It's kind of easy to get a lot of things from. World War I gets a little bit more difficult, but I think it's a war that we kind of gloss over because of World War II, even in history class. It's like, there was this
definitely.
World War I and then World War II. Like it's just this lead-in instead of it being its own separate war that, like even reading your short story, really understanding, that was its own thing. That had its own, its own people and places that were affected by it, leading into World War II, but its own separate thing,
Yeah, I think a big reason why there's in my opinion, two main reasons why World War I is glossed over, and I think for the biggest is that it's very difficult to explain how it began because it was very political, and several nations were involved, and it was actually connected to past wars. The Prussian War in the 1870s. So, and other things. So, a lot of political unrest and the monarchy switching hands. So it's very difficult to explain all that stuff to someone who doesn't have a deep understanding of the politics of Europe at the time. So there was that piece. And then the other piece is that World War II, millions of innocents who weren't soldiers were murdered and lost. Whereas World War I, sure, lots and lots. I mean, soldiers were died, and I think the body count is actually quite a bit higher than World War II.
Yes.
Yeah, but it's I think it has to do with sort of all the ethnic cleansing that was happening in World War II that was so tragic and horrible. So it's definitely easy to get stuck only reading about that and knowing about it, when in fact World War I actually changed the course of culture for Western civilization. Right. So it was actually, in terms of changing lifestyles, World War I was much, much more impactful. It destroyed the social class system. The middle class really rose up. There were lots and lots of inventions, technology-wise, and also in warfare. That's when the first tanks came out, and so on and so on. So, it was actually. It's too bad it's one of those wars that people don't really look into, because it's fascinating and it was hugely important. So and devastating.
Right. So. And I'm thinking coming into 2018. Since it'll be like 100 years, I bet there's going to be a lot more. We're going to see a lot more, things written about World War I. I've heard several authors say that. But the thing I like about you guys on Facebook is you're so supportive of each other. Like if one of you comes out with a book, everybody jumps in, and that's why I found you guys to begin with. Is everybody's been talking about your book, all your books between you guys, but this one in particular, they're like, you have to read this, and everybody's promoting it. I mean, don't you find that don't you love being a part of that community of people?
I do. There's something special about being a creative, being in that field as an artist. It's a very difficult existence because you feel so compelled to work on your art. Right. And you put all your heart and soul into it, and then you have to try to go to market with it. And the market doesn't always jive with what your heart and soul is putting together here.
Right.
So when it happens, when it all comes together, and there's a lot of luck involved, unfortunately, but when it all comes together and a book comes out, other writers that are your friends, they get it. They've been there. They've done all the hardship part of it and the exciting love part of it. And so we support each other, to try to get the books out there. It's a really cool thing. That's the upside of social media. I think there's some negative sides too, but it's, that's been a really cool thing to see. So, and be a part of.
Yeah. Especially with all the negativity, which I try to just weed through all my negativity on Facebook. And now that I have mostly authors on there, nobody cares about that stuff. Everybody's out promoting and talking fun stuff. And, I find it so refreshing. I mean, I love being in that world of, of the writers and, and just talking about books. That's, that's a really fun thing, So
definitely.
Let's talk about your other books, okay? Because you I could tell right away when I read your bio, I'm like, of course she loves French history, and I could totally see that in your books. So Rodin, however you say it.
I think I want to say Americans say it Rodin.
Rodin. Okay.
Rodin or Rodin. Sometimes you'll hear Rodin.
Now, was that your first book?
That's my second book. So my first book is Becoming Josephine, and it's about Josephine Bonaparte and how her sort of rise from a sugar plantation daughter to Empress of France. Her name originally was actually Rose. It wasn't even Josephine. Napoleon nicknamed all of his friends, and then Josephine kind of stuck. That's what he called her. So yeah, she actually came to me in a dream. I hadn't even thought about writing yet. It was, and in fact, writing was one of those things that kind of came later to me, my understanding of my love for it, which is odd because I won all these essay contests when I was in high school and college. When you think about a high school kid writing an essay for fun, that's just not normal.
That's not normal.
When I look back, I think, oh, huh.
Maybe it was still
wow.
there.
It was there all along.
Right?
Yeah, and I was copy editor of my high school and my college paper, and I did all these things, but it didn't occur to me to actually write until about 9 years ago. And Josephine came to me in a dream, and I didn't know anything about her actually. And she was leading me through the Tuileries, the palace, and through the gardens. And I had that dream for about a week, and I finally said, yeah, okay, I'm going to go look up this woman. I'm going to go see if there are any biographies on her. So I went and found this biography. It's an excellent biography. It's great narrative nonfiction. It reads like a thriller novel in a way, very beautifully written. And I fell in love with this woman's life. It was so chaotic and fascinating. And then I just turned to my husband one night when I was halfway through that and said, I think I'm going to write a book. And he was just kind of like, okay, honey, you go for it.
You go for your book.
All right. And since then, he says, I don't ever doubt when you say you're going to do something, because when you say it, you do it. I'm like, yes, thank you. Anyway, so yeah. And then after that, Rodin's Lover, it's 100 years later in French history. It's 1880s Paris, which hits me in that sweet spot. I love that sort of Gilded Age leading up to the Edwardian era of World War I. So, and I just love art. I've always loved art and museums and Rodin's pieces. He did The Thinker. I don't know how familiar you are with his work, but the famous. And he had this really tumultuous love affair with Camille Claudel, this woman who was a brilliant artist in her own right. And in fact, most of his famous pieces were inspired by their relationship. And he learned a lot from her, and she learned a lot from him. And there was some tragedy involved, as there often is in the art world. But it was a really, really beautiful, gripping story that I just had to tell. I had to try to tell it. Yeah, so that was my second book. And then I just sort of moved up in history to World War I. So
right, and then you did, and now you've got another book coming out at the beginning of the year. I saw with what's it called?
Yes.
Phantoms. There we go.
It's
and what's that about?
So The Phantom's Apprentice is a retelling of Phantom of the Opera from Christine Daae's point of view.
Awesome.
I was obsessed with Phantom of the Opera as a teen. My parents went and saw it and bought the CDs and played them all the time. And so I learned all the words and, memorized them and sang it and played it nonstop, drove them crazy. And they finally took me to go see it when I was 18. And ever since then, I've just always loved it. And so when I came up with this idea, I read the original novel, which was published in 1911 by Gaston Leroux. Andrew Lloyd Webber, he took the book obviously and then wrote the script for the musical. But and I just thought I actually really don't like these characters, which is so funny. Christine Daae is sort of this wilting, simpering female. That's how she's portrayed. And I just thought, this was written both times from a male perspective. I wonder what would happen if.
That's great.
I got into her head and wrote it from another perspective. And this was the book that was really challenging to write, because I had to work with a cast of characters and really well-loved canon and create a new story around it. I built up backstory around it and weaved in new characters. And it's very, very suspenseful. It moves very quickly. It's a fast-paced kind of historical thriller almost. And there's illusionists mixed in, because at that time in history, that's when magicians were really becoming.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, right. Yeah. because technology it was kind of on the cutting edge of electricity and using mirrors and several other things, cameras, a few things happening technologically wise. So magicians really kind of came into a height of fashion at this time. And in fact, Gaston Leroux, the original author, weaves in tidbits of this into the original novel that you don't see in the play. So that's kind of where I got my idea for this. So we have a Christine Daae who's torn between two paths. Does she want to become the illusionist she's always dreamed of being, or is she going to take the opera stage and be the singer her father always wanted? So and that's that.
That's pretty exciting. I mean, you have a very exciting next 6 months, okay, with the release of this book and then the release of your next book. So I have to ask you, what are you writing now?
So I'm jumping from France. I've done a lot of books in France, and I probably still have a couple coming down the pike at some point. But I'm coming to the New World for this next book. I'm going to be in the U.S. So it's 1900 U.S. and it's an immigration story. And it's a bit of a love story, and it's a story about friendship also. So there's a lot going on with it, but very much it's raw and in progress at the moment.
Oh, I can't wait.
So
I can't wait for the Phantom book too. So, you know, we have lots to look forward to. So anyway, I will be posting all your links, and if you could hold up The Last Christmas in Paris just so everybody can see that cover again, because everybody's going crazy over this cover. Okay, they are just loving the cover so much.
When I love a cover, I pet it.
Oh, I mean, how perfect is that cover? It's
a beautiful cover, and I got to tell you, this is actually an advanced copy, so it doesn't have the texture, but the finished copies have this part of it's almost beveled, and it kind of pops out, and the ribbon does too, so you can really touch it and feel they did a great job. There's a lot of beautiful design elements inside too.
Is it going to have the beveled pages on the hardcover?
I don't think it has the deckled edges. I can't remember, but I don't think so. Let me see if I can find this.
I do love the hardcover.
It's probably hard to see in this, but
that's beautiful.
I should go this way, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to see, but it's lovely. So they've done a really nice job.
They did a really good job. Doesn't that just warm your heart when you see it like that? I mean...
Or scream.
Or scream. Oh, yeah. You could just scream.
When they showed up, there was a lot of squealing and that kind of thing. So...
Well, I wish you the best of luck in everything with that book, and and in Phantoms, and I can't wait to read more of your stuff. I mean, you are amazing.
Thank
I'm
you.
so happy
to
be able to talk to you. And like I said, I'll put all your links there for everybody, and best of luck for you.
Thank you. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.